All right, welcome back to Eat Well Online. I'm Vanessa, and we're going to be talking today about portion pointers. Before we get into the actual lesson, which you see in front of you, I just want to welcome anyone who might be watching on YouTube for the first time. If you do ever have any questions about this program or any of our Eat Well programming, you can always contact us at eatwelldietitians@uky.edu. Today, before we get into the lesson, I just want to note that we do have a new recipe from our kitchens on the website. You may have seen this in the weekly email that Karen sent out yesterday. This recipe is from Karen's Kitchen, and it's for the one pot lemon orzo shrimp. So one pot lemon orzo shrimp. She said this was a hit in her family. Does anyone not know what orzo is? If you don't, just put it in the comments. But this is, she said it's easy, it's one pot. You really, all you have to do is squeeze the lemon, is what she said, as far as prep is concerned. And if you don't like shrimp, any protein would be fine in this. If you wanted to do another fish, or if you wanted to do chicken, or even some white beans might be nice in this if you're trying to keep it plant-based. And if you are a meal prep person and you were concerned about the shrimp over a few days, just keep the shrimp out when you prep it and add the shrimp as you eat it. You can always get that fully cooked frozen shrimp, and that would make it even easier as well. So if that recipe sounds good to you, please make sure to check it out on the Eat Well website. All right, any questions about that recipe? Anything else? Okay, I'm going to minimize the camera so I stop looking at myself. All right, I see someone has joined us by phone. If you could just type your name either to me or in the group chat, just so for attendance purposes, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, let's talk about portion. All right, so we have done portion lessons in the past in this class, right? We're switching it up. This is going to be a new look, a new approach to the portion pointer. Okay, because when we looked back at some of our older lessons, it really felt like they were no longer in line with our philosophy here at Eat Well, right? Because lots of times when it comes to portion lessons, and we have not been immune to this, what word, I'm going to ask you, what word often follows the word portion? What word do we usually say? Yes, right? Nina nailed it straight out of the bat, right? Yes, right? Control. Okay. I don't really love that phrase, portion control. I don't know. How do you guys feel about it? Do you feel like it has a particular association? Lori. Okay. Okay. It's limiting. A little restrictive. I don't know. Maybe it's just us, right? I find it has a little bit of a negative connotation, portion control, right? It is limiting. I feel like whenever I work with clients and we talk about that they want to work on portion control, they often do it with kind of like a downcast expression, maybe a little bit of shame associated with it. And so we're looking to really sort of change that up a little bit today, okay? Because what people usually mean deep down when they say that they want to work on portion control is that they usually mean that they need to work on recognizing and actually honoring their hunger cues, their fullness cues, as well as respecting their body by eating consistently, choosing foods that are both made up of nutrients, right, that they need, but also bring satisfaction to the plate. And there's all different kinds of satisfaction out there, right? So we've talked about eating intuitively in this class, tuning into those needs, honoring hunger and fullness cues, discovering not only satisfaction, but what it means for you, okay, because it's going to be different for everybody. We've also talked about avoiding the designation of foods as good or bad, right? We're trying to break down that binary when it comes to foods and just recognize food as food. We've talked about honoring your feelings without using food, okay? While we recognize that's going to happen sometimes, it's when the only way that you can look at your feelings is through food, is that it becomes something to change, right? So we want to just really, talk about honoring your health with some gentle nutrition tips. But when it comes to portion pointers, we had to look at that a little bit more closely. So we want to, I don't know, we want to change it up, I guess, because while a lot of people will come to this program feeling like they need more rules, right? They need restrictions, limits when it comes to foods to eat or foods not to eat. We disagree. Okay, we feel like we can address both of these concepts, you know, portions and honoring your body's needs, and how they can coexist in a non-limiting way. Does that sound good? Okay, so this is how we are going to do it today. All right, we've got some pointers. I'm not going to be telling you to eat half a cup of pasta. I'm not going to be telling you to eat a tennis ball sized piece of fruit, right? I'm going to tell you instead to first start with looking at your plate, right? Seems pretty obvious, but sometimes we don't, especially if we're distracted and doing other things while we're eating, right? So you want to eat satisfying meals that are balanced, right? So what does that mean? Let me ask you guys, what does a balanced plate that is also satisfying look like for you? Anybody have any ideas? What's a balanced plate look like for you guys? We can start with different kinds of food groups. That's always a good way to start, right? We can start with macronutrients if you like. To me, a satisfying plate is going to include a fiber-rich or complex carbohydrate, right? So either fruits or veggies or whole grains. It's going to include a plant-based protein for me. For other people, it's going to include an animal-based protein, right? It's going to include some healthy fat. Usually for me, that's olive oil, sometimes nuts and seeds, sometimes avocado. Each of these food groups has a lot of unique nutrients to offer, but you're also going to feel more, again, satisfied, right? It's not just eating for health all the time. You're eating for satisfaction. You're going to feel more satisfied if you include at least 2 out of these 3 food groups, okay? Protein and fat especially promote satiety, or that feeling of fullness that you experience after eating a meal, all right? Same with the higher fiber carbohydrates. They promote that feeling of fullness, especially when compared to their more refined or lower fiber counterparts, okay? So try to include those groups. If you're trying to avoid all carbs, when we do hear all carbs, you know, going out the window for short periods of time, if you are trying to eat super low calorie all of the time, all right, the chances are you're not going to feel this sense of satiety. You're not going to feel this sense of satisfaction for very long, okay? Now, of course, everyone's needs are going to be different. This is just the case for most people, okay? Now, while you're looking at your plate and you're trying to balance things, okay, it's also important to keep in mind that not every single meal is going to be balanced, and that's okay, right? We're not striving for perfection, because perfection does not exist, okay, for anybody. We are just looking to guide ourselves toward a variety of nutrients, a variety of foods. we're guiding ourselves toward that after meal satisfaction, because we don't want to feel hungry right after we eat, right? Because that usually leads us to eat more than we absolutely need. Okay, so that's what looking at your plate is going to accomplish. Also, we would urge you to eat consistently, right? And I totally get it that some people make lots of noise when they're teaching. I totally get that some meals are difficult to make happen consistently. Does anyone have a meal that is difficult for them to make happen on a consistent basis? Sometimes breakfast is difficult for people if they're commuters, right? Sometimes lunch is difficult if you feel like people are always scheduling meetings during lunch. Sometimes dinner is difficult to make happen consistently because you get tired. You're tired at the end of the workday. You get home and you're just like, oh, now I have to cook dinner. Okay, yeah, so it sounds like dinner is something that you identify as being a little bit difficult to happen, right? I mean, the solution being Cynthia, I'm not sure what a mover is. Is a mover, oh, that's hilarious. I have never heard that term before. Mom mover. Oh my gosh, I hope you get a tip at the very least. 5 stars. Jeez, mover, that's good. Yeah, dinner can be challenging, right? You get home, you've already worked a full day, and then it feels like you still have work to do, I will say that a solution, it's not always everyone's favorite solution, but it's a solution that works, is planning ahead, right? How does the planning work for you guys? Do you feel like it's something that you're able to at least try? Do you feel like it's something that you've seen work when you are able to do it? I don't know. That is something that, now everyone's planning ahead is not going to look the same, right? My planning ahead is not going to look like your planning ahead and vice versa. It might mean going to the grocery store regularly. It might mean keeping a stocked pantry. It might mean knowing what foods will work for your family on a particular week according to their schedule. It might mean doing a lot of food prep on the weekends, right? But whatever you do, that's all different kinds of planning, okay? So if you know that you can make a couple components of a dinner, right, and keep them ready in the fridge on make them on a Sunday or something and have them ready to go for the rest of the week, great. Maybe that means you're just defrosting something from the freezer, also great, okay? Maybe you've got something cooking in the crock pot, okay, that's ready when you get home from work. All of these things count. Maybe you look at the healthy convenience food list, right, and you have those in your pantry, okay? All of these things count, all right? But you want to make sure that you do eat consistently, and planning ahead does work for this. Doesn't have to be fancy or complicated, okay? Put the social media away when you're planning your regular weekday meals for sure. You do want to make yourself a priority as well, right? Particularly if lunch, eating lunch consistently, or some sort of midday meal opportunity, if you find that that's a consistent problem for you, you do want to make it a priority to get up from your desk and make lunch happen, right? If that means blocking off like 20 minutes on your calendar, making it sacred, you're not available, that's what it takes, and that's what I would say to do. Set a reminder on your phone. We always have our phones with us, right? Maybe use that function as well. And also too, I will say, if you're not eating something around the middle of the day, you're going to be a lot more likely to capitalize on treats in the break room, right? It's Girl Scout cookie season, y'all. They're everywhere. Or maybe like as soon as you get home from work and you're starving, we hear that from people a lot of times, right? Because you haven't eaten all day, okay? And all of a sudden, you're just kind of mindlessly grabbing food and eating as soon as you get home, right? Because you haven't had a substantial meal all day while you're at work for 8 hours, okay? And don't get me wrong, if you want a Girl Scout cookie because it sounds good to you and you've been waiting, like all year for those Thin Mints, If it's truly what you want, then yeah, you should definitely eat it. But if you're doing this every day or multiple times a day, that may not support whatever your health goals are, or make you feel as good as eating a balanced meal regularly, which also brings me to my next point, which is focusing on addition, not subtraction. Okay, talking about math sort of here, but as we know, most diet advice focuses on, as Cynthia noticed, limiting, right, or restricting, okay, ways to eat less, or not eat or limit certain foods, or healthy food swaps, right? I want to say that when we're talking about eating intuitively and honoring your body, right, all foods are going to be morally equivalent. That's where we're taking away that good or bad power of food. Okay, so all foods are morally equivalent. Now, some foods are going to be more nutrient dense than others, and that's just the way life is, right? If you're looking at kale and a bottle of Mountain Dew, all right, the kale is going to have more nutrients than the Mountain Dew, even though they're both green. All right, but just because that kale has more nutrients, just because that kale is more nutritious, doesn't always mean it's going to be the best choice for your needs every time. Okay, and we wouldn't want to have a diet that was all kale all the time, would we? That would be very limiting, even if it's deemed nutritious. All right, I mean, those are two very extreme examples, kind of ridiculous, but you get my point. Okay, I think a way to sum all that up is that nutrition and health are not the same thing. Okay, nutrition does not equal health. So you can, if you're printing it out, if you've printed out the handout, you can draw a little not equal sign between nutrition and health. Okay, so when you're adding in instead of subtraction, when you're focusing on addition, right, instead of focusing on restriction, the focus is going to be on including more nutrient dense foods. All right, so some examples could be, well, let's see, let me ask you guys. Is anyone working on a particular goal when it comes to addition? Is anyone working on trying to focus on a particular kind of food? I know I could always add more vegetables to my diet. CSA is a great way to do that, right? More protein. All right, Cynthia. So if you're looking to include protein more frequently, okay, maybe you could keep some nuts on hand for a snack. Maybe you could keep cans of beans around in your pantry to add easy plant-based protein to your meals. Maybe you could buy a big pack of chicken breasts and keep them frozen and marinate some as the week goes on in order to make an easy grain bowl or pasta dish, right? More veggies, Lori. If you're looking to include more veggies, you could saute some spinach and add it to scrambled eggs in the morning, or make little mini muffin cups full of veggies, right? You could mix some steamed veggies into a pasta sauce, right? You can make a lunchtime grain bowl. You can do salad in a jar. You can even put veggies in dessert, right? I don't know if you caught any of my desserts at that event a couple weeks ago, but they all had veggies in them, amazingly. A lot of people want more whole grains, right? That's a kind of easy one. You can switch a morning English muffin to a whole grain. You can add whole grain crackers and keep them in the snack drawer over your desk, right? Or packing some whole grains into your cooking, like quinoa or farro, maybe something new, right? Something you're curious about. So those are all just ways to focus on addition, right? And it's all, again, going to be what you can add, okay? But in order to know what you can add, you got to know what you're currently eating, right? And see where you can make a little bit of change, okay? You liked the chocolate cupcakes? Those are pretty good. Did you know what was in them? I've made similar recipes like this before. Not until, yeah. So for those of you who were not at this event, I did do chocolate cupcakes that had beets in them. There was also some beets in the frosting if you had the pink frosting, and you would not have known unless you tried it. Not that I'm necessarily an advocate for hiding vegetables in your food. This was more of a gimmick, but still, it was kind of fun. All right, let's see. Next tip that we have for portion pointers is zooming out. I think this can be really challenging for people because it's kind of human nature. When we make a change, we feel like we have to kind of look at everything on like a micro sort of viewpoint, right? Because we feel like we need to control everything. So I would encourage you to instead to focus on the big picture instead of those individual food choices, all right? I will tell you that individual food choices, when taken one by one, make very little difference when it comes to overall health, okay? I don't really think that you can, let's say, necessarily look back to a double bacon cheeseburger that you had 15 years ago and be like, okay, that was it. That was the tipping point. That was the meal that ruined it all, right? It sounds ridiculous, right? So accordingly, one meal or one snack that you might be stressing about right now is not going to make a big difference in the context of your health, in the context of nutrition, in the context of your life, right? So if you're thinking of ways to improve the overall quality of your diet, right, it's going to be worth thinking about these patterns, okay? Not obsessing over a single meal or a single social eating situation like we often hear. So for example, if you start thinking about your personal eating patterns, and you notice that you go out to lunch most days, all right, let's think about instead, is there a way that you could pack a lunch, quick and easy, that maybe has some produce in it? If you're currently doing it 0 times a week, then do it 1 time a week, okay? If you feel like you could manage more, then do a couple times a week, all right? It's not about these sweeping 180-degree changes. It's about, again, you hear us say it time and time again, but it's about these small changes that are manageable for you, okay? If you know that you drink a lot of sugar-sweetened beverages, another example, is there a way that a couple times a week you could incorporate more lower sugar beverages like flavored water, or seltzer, unsweetened iced tea, half and half tea, okay? If you like sandwiches, okay, again, we're getting very like basic here. If you like sandwiches, could you switch out to a whole grain bread? You'll get more fiber. You'll feel fuller afterwards, okay? So these little shifts in the patterns of your thinking and in the patterns of your eating, that's what makes much more of a difference, okay? Looking at those patterns. And again, continuing to reassess, continuing to maybe every few weeks, look at the changes that you've made and see where you can make a few more, okay? And that's going to be a formula or a recipe for more sustainability when it comes to health. All right, I'm going to switch over to page 2. Page 2. Any questions or thoughts before I get into page 2? Okay. Okay. So this is a big one. Eat the foods you love. A lot of people come in, they've decided they want to make a change, and they're nervous that they're never going to eat blank again. Okay. And I know we've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. You are allowed to have foods you love on a regular basis, okay? Not just on special occasions or on the weekends, because that strategy usually backfires, right? When you restrict a certain food for a really long time, it's almost inevitable that what happens? How do you feel when you just completely say, well, I'm never going to eat this again? I know what happens when when I do it. You feel really out of control around the food the next time you see it, right? So yeah, exactly. It like looms over everything, right? So, and we see this a lot, people will say that they, are gonna eat clean or eat somehow Monday through Friday, and then the weekend happens, and then free for all, you know? And this massive swing from one extreme to the other is really not going to do anybody any favors, right? So when you're not restricting and you're eating foods that are actually satisfying to you, you don't necessarily feel a need to quote unquote cheat, because there's nothing to cheat on, right? And again, this will come after we stop ourselves from labeling foods as good or bad, because food is food, as we will then learn. And there's not any judgment needed. There's not any shame needed. And this can be like a very scary process. I do want to acknowledge that. Okay. Sometimes when we sort of push this idea at people, they come back at us and they're like, well, yeah, that sounds great, Vanessa, but I know I'm just going to eat pizza 365 days a year. And then I would usually challenge back and say, are you though really? Like really gonna, most people, again, don't want to just eat one thing or one type of food for the rest of the days, you know? And you might feel like this way, okay? But trust me, all right, you won't. Even at first, if you do end up eating more of these foods than you usually would, you won't engage in this pattern of eating forever, okay? As long as you continue to work on making peace with your choices and making peace with your body, because it does take that continual work, right? I've said this a couple times already today, a continuing assessment of your change and of your needs and of your satisfaction levels. All right. Every eating occasion is an opportunity, really, okay, to learn more about yourself. So instead of feeling guilty or judging yourself, try to sit back a little bit and reflect. Okay. Ask yourself, if I was faced with this same situation again, what would I do differently? Or, what would I do the same? Maybe there's nothing that you want to change about that particular situation. And that's a completely valid reflection as well. All right. But when you do have this unconditional permission, when you're working on this permission to enjoy foods that you love, you're going to be a lot less likely to binge on a particular item that was once off limits. Okay. Because that food no longer has any power over you. Pretty sure Karen was talking about this last week. Okay. You'll be surprised. Okay. I guarantee you will surprise yourself. But your body's cravings will shift and your cravings will change, and it is all part of this process. You just have to give yourself a little bit of time to come to this. Okay. Speaking of time, so you'll have to slow down and tune in as well while you're eating. Okay. I feel like this is a really big issue for a lot of people. We're always multitasking. Some of you might be right now, right? There's so much to do all the time. There's so many distractions. When we're eating, we have our phone next to us. We're staring at some screen or another, right? We live in a really busy world. We're always rushing around, being a mover, right? From one place to the next. I'm totally, someone who does this as well. Yeah, exactly right, Lori, right? You're doing it right now. You're doing 4 different things. Yeah. So, it's just life. We know this, but it is so easy to overeat when we are multitasking, okay? Because we're not paying attention, and all of a sudden, all of our food is gone. You have stomach ache maybe because you ate too much, or you just don't even know what you ate. So we would encourage you to be more present, right? Not only while you eat, but also while you're creating whatever your plate looks like or pouring a beverage, okay? Pay attention to how much food it takes to fill you up. but also how much food it takes for you to be satisfied after you eat. And again, at first, you might have a really hard time recognizing these feelings of fullness, but again, that patience is going to help you to continue to tune in and realize what does fuel your body in all of the different and necessary ways. Okay. Knowing how you feel after you eat can be very valuable. All right. You could keep a journal if this would help you through this process. It doesn't have to be a food diary. It can look like all different kinds of things. People have sent us photos before. People have just sent us thoughts or snippets of feelings. I think when you're doing a food journal or any sort of self-reflection, it's very important to keep in mind that your hunger levels are going to vary from day to day or from week to week, and that's all normal and all part of the process. Karen and I will laugh sometimes. You're like, oh God, I'm having a hungry day. Some days there's just not enough food ever, right? And then some days you're just like, not really that hungry today, okay? But your needs are going to change for a variety of reasons, right? So just don't panic if you feel like you're having a hungry day all of a sudden. Okay, you're not broken. It's just your body is responding to something. All right. But if a journal would help with this process, you know, it might help you make more nutritious choices on the whole. Okay. So knowing what feels good, all right, is helpful. Now, that doesn't always mean that you're going to choose the foods all the time that make you feel good, right? Sometimes you're going to choose foods that are going to satisfy you in different ways, and that's completely fine, all right? But tuning in and how different foods or different meals eaten in different places or at different times, how it affects your energy and affects your digestion can help you eat more healthfully. Again, it's tuning in to what works for you, right? So for example, I know if I eat something really, really sweet in the morning, I'm going to feel a little bit junky, right? I'll have like kind of a stomach ache. My energy will be like up and down, you know. Now sometimes I might eat that thing anyway because it looks really delicious, but some days I won't, right? Depends kind of what I have planned for the rest of the day. So some days I'll just give it a pass. But yeah, some days it might look really delicious and I'm willing to deal. Thanks, Cynthia. With however feeling might come. Okay, so different people are going to react differently to different patterns of eating, period. All right, paying attention to how food makes you feel is going to help you figure that out. I've had some clients who notice that they sleep better at night when they have a dinner of just protein and vegetables. I have seen other people who feel really energized by having carbs throughout the day. All right, maybe a little bit less protein. It really depends, okay? But noticing a pattern of eating that feels good for you doesn't mean that you have to follow it as a rigid rule, but it's going to help guide you, I guess, in making eating decisions that work for you in the long run, okay? So again, we're busy people, like Lori noted, right? We may not have time to sort of leisurely take notes on everything that we're eating and how we're feeling and all this. Maybe if you feel like you are one of these busy people, choose one meal or choose one day that you're going to pay more attention to, all right? And really try to be present then, okay? And just doing that will make it a lot easier to start recognizing your needs and your tastes and how they change from situation to situation or season to season or anything like that, okay? Lastly, give a little grace. Sometimes that we forget that, right? Or we give grace to everybody else and we don't have any left for ourselves, okay? Just because this is last does not mean it is least, right? You may feel like you've forgotten how to have these conversations with yourself, and that's okay, all right? There's no such thing as perfection. It's completely inevitable that we are going to overeat sometimes or eat foods that make us feel meh or anything like this, right? And eating intuitively is not going to make these feelings go away, okay? Because we're all still human. But what we'd like to focus on instead is overeating less often, because no one really likes that feeling. Honoring your body more, right? Being able to just move on if you feel like you've made decisions that don't support your overall goals. Not dwelling on those situations, not feeling guilty, not starting any restricting and binging cycles, right? That all comes from giving ourselves just a little bit of grace. Because you know, you can do this, all right? You can manage your food intake successfully, right? You can manage your portions in a way that supports your goals by looking at these three things, right? Looking at your hunger and fullness cues. When are you hungry? When are you full? That's what it boils down to. Note these things. A little bit of nutritional knowledge. That's where Karen and I come in. If you do have questions about higher fiber foods, about higher protein foods, about foods that contain XYZ, right? We can help you with that if you notice that maybe you're missing out on a particular group of these foods, okay? But also understanding what works for you individually is key. And that's very important too, right? That comes with you. That comes with this reflection, okay? That's where most of us want to be, right? Knowing what works for you. No one accomplishes this overnight, right? It's a skill that takes practice, okay? Always, always a practice, all right? Progress, progress. So these portion pointers are not meant to be telling you just eat what you want, right? But it's about creating a more positive relationship with food, about giving yourself the mental space to be able to create that positive relationship. And it's meant to encourage you to adopt habits that are self-promoting, right? That encourage self-care. That's what this is all rooted in, as well as sustainable change. Okay, that's what we're all about, right? Any questions about anything that we've talked about today? How do you guys feel about this? I know this is something that, again, it's more of that psychological approach to nutrition, right? Looking for ways that we can support ourselves that make sense to us, that support our particular needs. That's what this is, what we're all looking for. And a lot of the programming at Health and Wellness is going to support this particular journey. So I hope that you all it gives you something to chew on, right? Thanks, Nina. A Chinese New Year celebration. That's right. It's the Lunar New Year. There's all kinds of yummy and different foods that maybe we can encounter this time of year if we're attending a Lunar New Year celebration. So I hope you have a lot of fun, Lori. Maybe you'll try some new foods. But otherwise, you will get Karen next week. She's going to be talking about emotional eating, I believe. So it's going to dovetail really nicely with this lesson. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great rest of your week and weekends, and we will see you soon. Thanks.